think the quote's good. Just take out Lincoln so people.
I took your.
All the beverages here. Hello, everybody. Before we get started with the risk and compliance meeting, I wanted to acknowledge that the governor has called for a moment of reflection at noon today on what it means for our nation and community to come together. So we'll pause the audit review and compliance, risk and compliance meeting at 12 o'clock if you wish to participate. With that, we will turn to what everybody has been waiting for, the first meeting of the fiscal year 2026. As you know, this committee plays a key role in carrying out the board's fiduciary duties around our financial statements and controls, institutional compliance, and risk management. Each September, the committee focuses on our oversight of compliance, and today we'll have our discussions in open and closed session. First, Augie Maurelli, VP and CFO, will provide an update on the Auditor of Public Accounts audit of fiscal year 2025, which is already underway. Then compliance leaders in both the academic division and UVA Health will discuss their compliance programs. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions on written updates from audit and compliance as well. Then we'll go into closed session to continue our discussions of UVA Health compliance matters, primarily progress on mediation of material weakness and internal controls and the ERP implementation plan. So Augie, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for allowing me to give a very brief update on our current fiscal year 2025 financial reporting and audit status of the consolidated financial statements. Since the June meeting, we have successfully closed fiscal year 25 and are well underway with the current audit. Several leadership meetings have occurred throughout the summer, and we recently met as recently as last week with the APA to make sure we're receiving real-time feedback, and I can speak with certainty that we are on track and ahead of progress from last year. As a leading indicator, PwC, which is the auditor for community health, met with executive and senior leadership just this past Monday, and they intend to issue an opinion and statements probably toward the end of next week or the week after. I point that out only because that would provide an audited opinion prior to our HE10 submission and would greatly help expedite the remaining half of the audit from a consolidated statement perspective. So wanted to thank Eric, Chuck, and his team for continuing to partner, and as a leading indicator, all of their remarks on the remediation efforts, can't speak, apologies, has been very positive. Just a quick highlight on this slide as to what the workflow looks like to get to those statements. To date, the APA is over 75% complete on their control work and data requests, but they really won't start auditing the trial balance and statements until after we submit that HE10 document at the end of September. So a lot to do, but things are going incredibly well from a process improvement perspective. So in short, looking forward to coming back in December and hopefully having printed, drafted, audited statements with a clean opinion at that time. And that's all I have. Any questions? We'll cover some more later on in the meeting.
It sounds like you're in that crucial phase where the auditors are
about to tell us something great.
So, yeah, to use auditor language, I think it's we found nothing to contradict your claims of remediation is the term they use. That's where we are.
That's great. Any questions for Augie at this point? Well, Augie, on behalf of this committee and the entire board, we are so grateful for the amount of time that you and your team have put into this and the progress that you've made in rebuilding our controls and instilling confidence in our financial reporting. We look forward to hearing from you and the Auditor of Public Accounts in December on the outcome of all this incredible work that has been in place over the past year and a half. So Gary, now we'll turn it to you for a discussion on compliance.
Hey, thank you. Good morning. I'm Gary Nimax. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Compliance.
And as we plan the annual calendar for the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee, each September we focus on the university's compliance programs. So today you'll hear first from Meredith Mays-Espino, our Director of Privacy Programs for the Academic Division, about how we're improving our processes regarding data privacy. And then after that, I'll provide an institutional compliance overview and discuss our compliance helpline a bit. And then after that, we'll go into closed session for some additional discussion with Krista Barnes, who is the Chief Compliance and Privacy Officer from UVA Health. And then later this afternoon, the full board will receive NCAA rules education from a member of our compliance team in athletics. This is an annual requirement to comply with NCAA regulations. So with that quick overview, I'll turn it over to Meredith. Her full bio is in the board book, but I wanted to share a couple of highlights. Meredith joined us from AARP, where she served as the VP and Associate General Counsel for Privacy. She's active in the International Association of Privacy Professionals, through which she holds her professional certifications, and she earned her law degree from the University of Illinois, Chicago. She joined UVA in January as our inaugural Director of Privacy Programs for the Academic Division. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Meredith.
Thank you, Gary. So first I want to talk about what is privacy. Privacy is the ability to control what personal information about oneself is collected, how it's used, who has access to it, where it's shared, and how it's deleted. Personal information means any information about a human person, any information. So this can be, of course, your name, address, and phone number, but it can also be your car registration number or your license plate. It can be your web browsing history, or it can be your location data. So there are many statutes that govern how UVA handles personal information. So of course we all know about FERPA and GLBA, HIPAA, 2 different Virginia breach statutes, and also the Government Data Collection and Dissemination Practices Act, which regulates how privacy operates in governmental agencies, including UVA. UVA also has a lot of policies that deal with specific types of handling for specific types of personal information. However, we as of yet have no policy that governs overall privacy practices in the academic division.
Good luck. All those, yeah.
So the Privacy Management Accountability Framework, which we've adopted, speaks to the legal requirements that we have as well as best practices. There are 13 privacy management categories with over 130 activities to guide compliance at UVA. The framework provides a governance structure, guidance on embedding privacy into operations, lays out how to monitor operational and data handling practices, and requires tracking of new laws, regulations, and best practices. So I want to talk about the accomplishments thus far, which would be since January. I've documented all the privacy laws and regulations that apply to UVA's privacy operations. I reviewed all university policies to build a framework under which I can work. I've created privacy.virginia.edu to provide privacy information to the university community, including you. I've drafted a privacy notice template for departments and schools to use, which is currently under council review. I've also drafted an academic division policy for privacy and personal information handling, which is also under council review. And I've undertaken to create a data register, which addresses the statutory requirement and provides a catalog of all personal information in every system in which it's held. This will make responding to data subject rights requests easier, as well as making drafting and keeping up privacy notices much more efficient. Does anybody have any questions?
The question, what are the rules around a parent, a child student voluntarily waiving privacy to the parents for whom they are dependent? And it has to be done in each case. I mean, it could be medical, it could be disciplinary, it could be a number of things. It'd be nice as a parent whose kids wouldn't mind waiving that privacy for their parents. It'd be nice if we could do that because we still take responsibility for them.
Under FERPA, they would have to waive it.
Right, but
Yeah.
can they do it in a blanket?
Sure.
They-
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are mechanisms through our student system through which they can specify who can, for example, receive their bills, who can see their grades, that sort of thing. So that we have documentation that the student's given that release. But yeah, that's all done through SIS, our student information system.
Any other questions? Thank you,
Thank you.
Meredith. This is obviously a very complex and evolving regulatory area, and so we really appreciate that to have your expertise and experience. So thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. Glad you're here. Okay, so we'll begin taking, for the institutional compliance review, we'll start by taking a look at the organization and where we fit into the broader university. So I report to Carolyn Saint, the Chief Audit Executive, who in turn reports to Porter Wilkinson, the Chair of the Audit Compliance and Risk Committee. And Carolyn also reports administratively to JJ for day-to-day operations. And through the compliance charter that the Board of Visitors initially approved to create the institutional compliance function and my position, I have direct access to the chair of the Audit Compliance and Risk Committee if needed. That's what's represented by the dotted line from the orange UVA compliance box back to the Board of Visitors, but that's the mechanism through which we have that connection. And then below my name, I've listed a sampling of some of the key members of the compliance network, and I'll talk more about that. It's worth pointing out a few members of the compliance network report directly to me. Meredith, who you just met, Caroline Walters, who was here at a prior board meeting to talk about records and information management, and Steve Sherman, who's my manager of university compliance program on the academic side. Then the additional members of the compliance network are, by design, very decentralized or federated, and they report up through their respective units rather than reporting to me. So for example, I mentioned the compliance team in athletics. They report up through the athletics director so that they're embedded as a key member of the senior leadership team in athletics. But we discuss often any concerns that they're working on, any compliance issues, if we receive helpline reports that need to be resolved by them, that sort of thing. So a little more about the compliance network. I chair this group comprised of subject matter experts from the university's major compliance areas who work together to manage our compliance with federal, state, and other regulatory compliance requirements. We meet regularly to share information with each other, usually spotlighting one compliance area to make sure that the whole team is aware of those responsibilities, and then there's an opportunity to share what's going on in their respective areas. So on this slide, I gave some examples of the recent presentations we've had just because it covers a wide variety from IT security to research integrity, FOIA, threat assessment are some examples of some of the things we've talked about. And anytime I talk about compliance, I like to cover the concept of the 7 elements of an effective compliance program. And these come from US federal sentencing guidelines. They're widely considered the best practice for how any organization, including your own organizations, would demonstrate its due diligence in taking programs seriously. The key points are that we have policies and training in place to make sure people understand what their responsibilities are and that we monitor processes to confirm that we're in compliance. So today we're really focusing primarily on items 2 and 5 that specify that our compliance areas have oversight by high-level personnel with periodic reporting to the board, and that we have systems in place for reporting suspected wrongdoing. Yeah, sure.
The organizational structure slide that you had up before, you don't need to bring it back up, but the implication of that to me, and I just wanted to confirm this, is that the audit function is sort of reports directly to the board and independent, just as a governance structural matter, independent of the normal through the president's office reporting. Is that accurate? And then when you mention the people who are embedded across the organization, like reporting up to, for example, you said the athletic director. I assume that doesn't change the fact that if there's a compliance issue, that those people are independent just in the management sense. Is that true? Is that accurate? And is that how? I assume that's designed for that reason.
Right. So the audit charter, like the compliance charter, specifies that there is this direct line to the board. So yes, if we reported to another manager and that manager happened to be involved in something they shouldn't be involved in, then we have that degree of independence. And certainly, I think that's part of the challenge is that then, yes, certainly the individuals in these various schools and departments need to have the flexibility to investigate what they need to investigate. Right. If they run into problems like that, they can certainly come to Carolyn and me, they can come to JJ, they could come to someone else if there's
Just to use the example you brought up,
yes.
If the person in the athletic department suspected there was a problem, they can come, they're not dependent on their job for like the athletic director. They have an independent report up to the audit function and ultimately to the porter and the audit committee of the board. Is that right?
And I would say yes, and they have multiple ways, right? So they can.
Structural question on that.
Yeah, so they can, yes, they can go
not
directly into internal audit. They can
Okay.
also go directly into the Commonwealth. Again, there are multiple channels,
Right.
and we do have protections
Right.
for whistleblowers or people who.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Just again, from a governance standpoint.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Clarify,
Carolyn,
so
please.
compliance is considered a management function, so they're not independent as an
Okay.
audit function is, right? So compliance, if you think about 3 lines of defense, there's management responsible for day-to-day control.
Right.
Compliance, advice, and some oversight of
Okay.
controls,
That's helpful.
but works for management, and then audit. And so it is 3
I
distinct
see.
kinds of disciplines.
Okay. Thank you.
But again, I just want to challenge that slightly. That is true, but if there's a situation where an employee feels a supervisor or a colleague is blatantly violating a policy or a procedure, there are multiple channels in which that person can raise their concerns and have protection.
Right. That's the gist of what I'm asking, so I appreciate that, JJ. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So there are 2 overarching documents, each of which has been approved by the board that serve as the core foundation for the institutional compliance program. I mentioned the compliance charter that sort of created it. The second, let me go back. The second one is the code of ethics for the academic division. This applies to faculty and staff. And when I describe it, I like to tell people, well, students have an honor code that defines at a high level what our expectations are, and this is sort of a similar item for faculty and staff. The medical center has its own compliance code of conduct that I think builds on these same principles, but takes a deeper dive into things like patient privacy, things that make sense for the medical center. But as part of new employee orientation, we ask that all new employees read the code of ethics. So we keep it as a one-pager, very simple to read principles that we share with everyone. Okay. So now I'll talk about the compliance helpline, which is an important component as highlighted by the 7 elements of an effective compliance program. We have both the traditional 800 number that's answered 24/7 by an independent third party, and then we also have a web intake form. With either mechanism, to get back to Doug's point, reporters have the option to remain anonymous as well. So if they need to report something anonymously, they may, and we also reiterate that they may report incidents without fear of retaliation. That's both in the Code of Ethics and embedded through our policies. So this report.virginia.edu has a list of various reporting mechanisms that are available to faculty, staff, and students to report concerns that they have, so that we have all those options listed in one place. So this slide, I like to show this because it demonstrates that we have a number of different reporting tools, including the compliance helpline to allow people to report concerns to us. And when we looked at a way to optimize and rationalize our hotline approach, I like to describe it as we were thinking of a house, and instead of funneling everyone through a single front door, we decided it made more sense to keep some of these existing doors we already had. Let's have multiple front doors and even a couple side and back doors, But the important point is that all that information ends up in the same place, and it's at Safe Grounds, which is our homegrown incident management system. And so we had already marketed through mandatory training for faculty, staff, and students the existence of Just Report It, to report things like Title IX issues, hazing. That's a more student-focused option, but there are also EEO kinds of concerns that can be reported there. Respect that HR has, report a barrier for physical kinds of barriers for accessibility that we might have. And, but they all end up in Safe Grounds where we can work on them together. So a note about the Safe Grounds community, this is a list of the departments that use Safe Grounds as their incident management system. So we've got compliance both on the academic division and for UVA Health using it. It's worth noting that, so when we get a report in there, we can share a report, we can reassign a report so that we don't pass the reporter around. We can instead just make sure the information gets to the right place. And it's worth noting that the other departments, we've spelled out academic division and UVA Health for compliance, but the other departments listed there cover both the academic division and UVA Health. It's one HR all the way across, equal opportunity and civil rights, Clery, youth protection, threat assessment, et cetera. Also, Student Affairs uses it, and we're building capabilities for honor and the judiciary committees to use it as well. So I'll share some metrics about the helpline to give people a sense of how it's being used. Like most institutions, most of the cases that appear in that system are related to HR. Here I've split it out into two different shades of orange to show the difference between the academic division and the medical center, but together they account for about 39% of our cases, and next is Student Affairs at 37%. And I think it's worth noting, I like to use Student Affairs as an example. That doesn't mean that these are all cases in which one student accuses another student of doing something illegal. It also is a way for Student Affairs to manage things like roommate disputes, academic discrepancies, students who need mental health services, so that they're able to link to a student profile and get a full picture of a student when they're working with somebody. Like what are the challenges they're facing right now? And then the next section's compliance, the yellow wedge, and we'll talk about that in more detail. So there are a few metrics that the board has asked me to keep sharing with them regularly. And what's helpful to keep these straight in my mind is that in every case, I'm going to talk about a 2/3, 1/3 split in how things happen. So the first example is we do have both the 800 number and the web intake form. We get about 2/3 of our cases through the web form and 1/3 through the traditional calling the 800 number. Again, it's noteworthy that this is shared by both the medical center and the academic division. That sets us apart from a lot of other universities that have multiple helplines, and I think it can get confusing, as you can imagine, especially for faculty and staff in the School of Medicine. They may not know which one of us to contact. And sometimes Krista and I have to talk about it to figure out which one of us should handle a situation. So, but instead of passing them around, we figure it out. All right, then the next one I'll bring up is anonymity. So in about 2/3 of the reports, the reporter provides their name and contact information, and in about 1/3, here 32%, they choose to remain anonymous. And that's been fairly consistent too when I looked at prior years. And then the final one is about substantiation. How many of these reports that we receive, how many of them end up being substantiated in some way? And again, it's about 2/3 of our cases are either fully or partially substantiated, with 1/3 not being substantiated, which I remind people means that it just means that the evidence provided and the investigation that follows didn't confirm what the report alleged. It doesn't mean that it necessarily that it didn't happen, but we weren't able to confirm that based on the evidence and the investigation. Okay. I'll let Krista cover this medical center slide, and then I'll have some closing remarks.
Okay. This is just an at-a-glance sheet that talks about, Gary mentioned the Safe Grounds activity. This is specific to the medical center. You'll see that the number of incidents that are being logged in SafeGround, they've been going up a lot. You'll notice that's not a bad thing. That's actually a pretty good thing. That means that people know how to report concerns. That is the number one hurdle that you need to get over if you're a compliance office, is people actually trusting you enough to call you or put in a web form thing and say, hey, this happened. I don't know if this is right. Will you look into it? I will also note, though, that when people come to us and ask for advice, like, hey, we want to make sure we're billing this correctly, will you take a look at our setup? We actually also log those in SafeGrounds, and we log them as a guidance request. And we logged at least 100 and something guidance requests last year. I'll tell you that's probably under-reporting, because I can tell you right now that I do not log every single email or phone call that I get. Like, that would take up my whole day. So I log the big ones. I log the ones we want to remember. I log advice that was hard to figure out, where I did a lot of research, and then we'll log it in there. So some of that increase is based on the guidance requests, and a lot of these do get further farmed out to HR. Or, the other day we had a patient call the compliance hotline and say they were frustrated because they hadn't gotten an appointment as quickly as they wanted. So we don't end up handling that. We triage that further to other people. But we do end up handling about over 600 real documented investigations per year, which is kind of a lot. So we do that. I, too, put in a slide on the whether it was substantiated or not. That is such a hard determination to make. I would not put a lot of, unfortunately, I wouldn't give that much thought. We're trying to refine how we report that stuff. But the reality is, someone could call us and say, hey, I accidentally got someone else's medical record and I gave it back to the nurse, but I just wanted to let you know that we had this privacy issue. And we will say, oh, great, thank you. Did you keep a copy? No. Do you remember anything from it? No. Okay, so that happened. It's not going to be a breach. It's not reportable to the government. Is it substantiated? Yeah, we did hand someone the wrong document, but it's not a problem. So we may have listed that as substantiated, but it's not, that type of thing isn't a problem. It's not a crisis, So take that with a grain of salt. Breaches, I'd like to call out, that's a regulatory determination we make. You can see that we had 575 privacy incidents. 28 of them ended up being breaches that are required to be reported to the Office for Civil Rights, which is the Department of the Health and Human Services Department that handles HIPAA. That's a pretty average number, 28. That's pretty standard stuff. They're going to happen. What that doesn't include, by the way, is the Change Healthcare breach that was nationwide, where we had 140,000 patients affected. Basically, half of the people in America were affected by that breach. So we had plenty too. That number does not include Change Healthcare. Does anyone have any other questions about what you see on this slide? We will have more information in the closed session.
All right. If not, I just want to reiterate what Krista mentioned. We see it as critical that we receive these reports. Some organizations fall into the trap of thinking that no reports means there are no problems, and that's definitely not the case. So our compliance professional organizations report on this and present on this regularly, and really the general consensus is that if you're not receiving reports like this, it's more indicative of either a lack of awareness of the helpline, it's a poor culture of compliance, or that people are just afraid to report. So it's better for us to identify these issues ourselves and deal with them proactively rather than have them become a problem or have an outside investigator notify them for us. And the only way we can fix these issues is if we know about them. So compliance has a very much, that's our approach with our departments, is that we're here to help you. So if you see a process and a policy that are out of sync, tell us about it and we'll help you correct it. And with that, we'll be going into closed session, or back to you, Porter.
Thank you. Before we go into closed session, I'd just like to say thank you. I think this discussion has revealed that compliance is really multifaceted. You have to have the right policies. You have to have a compliance of following those policies with your practices. You also have to have a robust reporting culture. And the people at the end of this table make sure that we are best in class on all of those dimensions. And I completely agree with you that the number of reporting shows we do have a robust culture here, both a culture of compliance and of reporting. And we have all of you to thank for that. And again, if the board is here to help you in terms of improving any of those dimensions, but we really appreciate the work that you do day in and day out to make sure that this university is in compliance across the academic division and the medical center. All right, Paul, do you have a motion to read us into closed session? Great.
Yes. Madam Chair, I move the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee in closed meeting to discuss proprietary business-related information about the operations of the medical center, where disclosure at this time would adversely affect its competitive position to consider the investment of public funds in an enterprise resource planning financial system where public disclosure could negatively impact procurement negotiations and to receive a legal briefing on compliance matters. The relevant exemptions to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act authorizing the discussions described above are provided for in Section 23711, subsections A6, 8, and 22 of the Code of Virginia.
So we'll excuse any public members who are here. UVA employees who need to remain in the room to hear the compliance discussions are invited to stay.
Madam Chair? Can I ask a quick question before we get started? And I think this is appropriate for closed session. If it's not, let me know.
Time out. We need to second the motion to move into
second.
closed section. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It's a live stream cut.
Live stream.
Oh.
This is supposed to happen.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
I move that we vote on and record our certification that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements and which were identified in the motion authorizing the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in closed session.
Second?
All right. Aye.
Ms. Wilkinson?
Aye.
Ms. Sheridan?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Manning? Aye. Dr. Okonkwo?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention to these important matters, and we are adjourned.
Augie.
Sitting there. Pardon?